Last week on Brupeg, Jenny from the block got some mounts made in a hurry so we could do a speedy dash to our new berth. This week, she gets the runs. Brupeg was a sunken fishing trawler that was stripped out and ready for the scrapyard. She's just completed a 10-year rebuild that's brought her back to life. With the help of volunteers and funded by our Patreons, community and subscribers, she'll be crewed by passionate people from around the world. If you'd like to be involved and support the project, please consider joining us on Patreon or subscribe to the channel. There's a link in the description below. There you have it, the difference between TIG and flux core MIG. It's a wee bit messier, but it does sort of burn it in. It's pretty hot. Right, now that we've got the genset fully mounted, we're in there nice and solidly. She's not going to go anywhere. That's rubber mounted. We need to replace the hose clamp that was holding this on because it fell apart. We've got another rubbish one back over here. We'll do both of them at the same time. We're also going to start this with no exhaust, so we need to get some water in this. We can start it without water for about 10 seconds or so, but we don't want to do that because we need to run it for about a minute. So we're going to hook this pipe to that pipe down there, which is our basically radiator top hose, radiator bottom hose. We're just going to link them together, get some coolant in this so that we can run it for a while. And the reason being is the shutdown procedure on this actually allows it to run for a minute without load on it to cool down and everything, and then it turns itself off. But it gives us a chance to check all the electrics are working and everything. And what are we going to do then? Yeah, and then once that's done, Duncan is about to race off, so we know that it's working electrically. We just have to then get the exhaust done and the keel cooling pipes and everything built. And yeah, fuel supply, that'll be done in a moment, and then we're ready to go, I think. Exhaust is back on, and we've got the flex joint onto a piece of straight pipe, basically blowing exhaust gas out the side of the boat. So no muffler, it's going to be a little bit rowdy. Water, we've got the bottom radiator hose here and our top radiator hose up here. So we've got a piece of 1 1/4 inch clear that we're just going to join onto there. There's 1 meter of it, so that'll have coolant in the system. It's not going to have lots of cooling capacity, but we're not going to run it for long enough that it matters. Finally, we need to organise fuel. We haven't got our fuel sorted yet, and yes, this place is a bomb site because we've been doing so much work and we had to push out really fast, so nothing at all got organised. But our mounts are all welded in. We're getting very close to being able to start this up.
Does it matter if there's air in that system?
Nah, there'll be air for a while. Okay, yep.
Ready?
Yep, go. So we will have an air bubble, but it's not the end of the world. So you can start and run these engines for, well, any engine pretty much. You can start and run it for like 10 seconds or so, whatever, without any water in them whatsoever, because they just don't get hot enough for it to really matter. But you don't want to have any load on it when you do that, and you don't really want to run it, if you can help it, without any water in them. There's zero coolant in this, it's just water, so we have to dump this as soon as we finish this. We have to dump it so that we can get the right coolant levels and everything in here, but this is just so that we can have some water in while we're running it up and testing the system to make sure it actually works the way it's supposed to work. And there's no possible way for air to bleed out, so we could maybe even put a hole in the top of this if we really had to bleed some air out or something, but for now this is just to be able to run it for a minute or so without it having a freak out. Mounts are done, water's done. I need to fit this pipe on for the air filter. Fuel system is pretty much done, so we've got our fuel pump feed, etc. all plumbed in. We've got 12 volt feed through to a fuel separator, and then it's going off to our injection pump. Oil level is good. We're not using this. This is a water sender, so it tells us if we've got low water coolant at the moment. The return line for the injectors, we just need to put that into a bucket or something for now. We need to fit this pipe going across here, which is this guy here. Now I have ripped off the stupid Jubilee clips. These things are the bane of my existence. I hate them. They will fail at some point when you least want them to. As soon as I can, they go in the bin, and we change them for these decent T-clamps. These things are really solid. You can get better Jubilee clamps, like silicon, proper silicon rated Jubilee clamps, but they're not very common, and yeah, anyway, these are just so much better. So we always try and swap those out wherever we can. So when we do the water system, these will be used rather than these silly little original clips. We're getting very close to being able to fire up. So Birk's organised the reduction in air bubble and put a little hole at the top, and we've got a punch that we're going to jam in and block it off when we need to. But for now, we've got rid of the bulk of the air in the system. Fuel's ready. The return is built. Safety first, so we've got our earths clamped down just in case. Dunk's figuring out the e-stop button, and we're going to lift this control box up off the ground while we're doing it. Now it's not connected electrically to the boat right now, so We're just doing like an engine test more than anything else. So we've structurally mounted our control box on a pillow so that when the generator jiggles around it doesn't scratch the crap out of everything. All the plugs and everything have been sort of tucked away over here. I'm about to hook up the battery to see if we can actually get some power going. But I think we're just about ready to go.
I think so. So our master switch is off, so that's for the alternator. And that's coming down to another circuit breaker anyway. It's not going anywhere, so we're waiting till
it's physically not connected.
Yeah, physically not connected.
Not coming out.
Yeah. So it looks like, I'm guessing that's master power for everything, so we'll connect the battery.
And then this should come alive.
This should come on. First test, we can check the lamp. Apparently it's a little lamp that glows. Now, as far as we know, we've got two settings here. That one's obvious, it's auto. And from what I understand, it's monitoring its own starter battery, which presumably could be the part of a battery bank, and it will then auto start when those batteries get too low. That's not the mode that we're after. We're after a manual start. So the manual start will do one of two things, but that first one also does many other things. So it basically starts the engine, gets all the parameters, checks all the parameters, gets them all right.
Yeah, I think we'll be running it for probably 30 seconds to a minute.
But when it's operational, let the engine warm up, and then when it's happy with all the parameters, we're happy with all the parameters, then we can liven up the AC side of it, which then goes up to the distribution board when it's wired in. So, there's the battery.
Game on. All right, we're good with water. We're good with, exhaust. The mounts are done, as you know. Fuel is done. We're gonna, when we fire it up, we should start seeing power through to the pump, which should brrr the fuel up to the injector pump. Check the oil. There's plenty of oil in there, which is good. It's nice and clean too.
Lovely.
Right, air intake is on. If all else fails, we can put the pillow over the air intake here and shut the engine off. We've got a little valve here that tells us if we've got too much restriction. That goes red if we've got too much restriction in the air filter.
That's nice.
We've got our E-stop down here, so if we need to slam the stop button, we slam that.
Do that. And we've got the all things being well stop button up there.
So yeah, okay, power on.
Do that. Oh, look at that. Okay, right, line voltage is 0. That's
showing disconnected.
Sense. I'd be really impressed if it was something. Try your lamp. There you go, that's the world's most expensive lamp so far.
Excellent, that's our backup anchor light if we need it. Alright.
Alright, so... yeah, that's it.
So do we just press start?
Okay, go ahead.
So a little...
Is there a time to...
sand measuring time thing? This must be glow plugs. Engine runs a little bit rough here. I think there's a wee bit of air in the fuel lines. Here Duncan's cycling through the different menus that we can see on our monitor. So voltage, hertz, amperage for line 1, kilowatts for line 1, percentage of load, kVA for line 1, kVR for line 1 power factor, total amount of power that's been produced, and the current RPM of the genset. Total runtime, 1 hour and 29 minutes, battery voltage 14.2, don't know what that one is, oil pressure, fuel isn't hooked up, hence we've got X.
Isn't that good?
Now that the genset is running temporarily, we can sort of work on the easier stuff such as water pipes, fuel pipes, etc. But before we do that, we wanted to get the dinghy back in the water, and there was a leak on the bungs. So we bought these aluminium weld-in bungs. We're going to throw those in. But before we could get onto that, we had to move the boat.
After the kerfuffle last week, having to move from the wharf we were on, we luckily can get into the old work berth we started in. So we're moving there for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back to here. So we've got quite a lot of work to get through. It's the only space when we're in the water around here that we can now do work on the boat. Until we've got the electrical system sorted out, the genset working, and then we can work on anchor. And that's the goal.
What we had to do here is come in forward, spin around at the last minute and reverse into a berth. Whilst doing this with a boat with no thrusters and very minimal steering in reverse before coffee first thing in the morning. It was here the 3 brain cells that I had functioning figured out it was not going to line up there, so let's go and start again. So, drive out, and then have another go at it. Weirdly, for some reason, I just couldn't get the prop walk to work the way that it's always worked on the boat, so I had to have multiple stabs at it, and I don't quite know why. There wasn't much wind, there was virtually no tide, it was fairly shallow as you can see by all the mud, but I still couldn't quite get it to work when I was going backwards. Normally what I can do is get the boat to go straight, and then I can flick it left and right by using forward thrust, but the boat just did not want to go straight today for some reason, and I haven't quite got my head around why that is. I was trying a technique that a couple of people commented on about leave the rudder on one side and then just use forward bursts because it doesn't do anything when it's over on the side in reverse. And then it clicked. I wasn't flicking the rudder from left to right. I was leaving it on one side so that when I do my forward bursts, I could keep the boat going where I wanted it. When I flip the rudder the other side, piece of cake. And therein lies the risk of manoeuvring before coffee. With the boat moved, we can get back into getting the dinghy floating again. First step, the hole saw wasn't quite big enough, so we're going to just open the hole up very slightly with a die grinder. This also has the added benefit of allowing us to clean up the aluminium so we can get a really good weld. So, nice new chunky aluminium bungs. That's the blank that we're welding in. That goes in there, and that's the bung that fits in the aluminium blank. One of the difficulties that we often come up against is welding aluminium when it's old aluminium. Like in this case, the dinghy is like a couple of years old now, it's fairly corroded, you can sort of see the discoloration and so on. So unless you clean up that aluminium, it's an absolute pig to weld and incredibly easy to get leaks. The reason we're dealing with the dinghy right now rather than the Genset is because the dinghy has nowhere to go. It can't float if it's on the back of the boat with a hole in it, so we have to fix it to get some workspace. Now that the dinghy's all welded up and floating and not necessarily sinking at a great rate of knots, it's time to deal with this. So, in a fit of rage the other day, we've moved the boat around so many times in the last couple of days it's silly. Anyway, it was really annoying stepping over top of this all the time with the dinghy on the back here whilst we were trying to manoeuvre. So we threw a couple of tags. You can see 4 tags basically there. We threw it down, chucked a weld over there and a weld down here somewhere just to hold it in. So we've basically got a deck whilst we're doing these sorts of things, but it's time to get this welded in properly. So I've got to cut this weld here, cut the weld over there, keep the tags on because they obviously help us locate it. I need to make some dogs because you see here, see how that doesn't line up? So we need the dogs to be able to get this to be perfectly flush when we tack it all together so that we're ready to go. I also need to prep this, so there's quite a lot of grinding to do to get this ready to weld. So we've taken back the paint on the boat, but we haven't taken it back on the deck hatch. And I also want to V this out a bit so I can really get in there and fill it up with weld. So there's quite a bit of prep to do, so we'll get that done first, and then we can set the machine up as MIG and get our yellow protection cloth over everything, and we'll start welding out. Right, first job this morning is cut the little tags that we welded in, get this thing up using the chain block, and then start grinding off the paint so we can get a good weld. While that's happening, over the back here, we've got these dogs that need to be cut. So we've got the other end of it. We've got the steel dog that needs to be cut out of the last of our 16mm plate. Right, we're cleaned up. Time to get this back over the hole and start the welding. And that's why the tags are so brilliant, is it sits flush just by plonking it in the hole, straight like that. Birk's in the engine room. I'm going to go through and wherever it's flush, like you can see right there, absolutely perfect. We're going to go through and tack anywhere that's flush, and then anywhere that isn't, we're going to bring up or down with the dogs. And Birk's catching all of the sparklies inside a bucket with water so that it won't cause any chaos inside the engine room. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to dog the rest. We're too much warpage. Alright, wee bit of work later, and there's our dog sets. So we'll weld these onto the boat, and we can bash the high point down with this, and it'll make everything level, just like we do on our hull plates when we replace them. Okay, here we go. So this is one of the edges. If I slide that along, you can see that it's sticking up quite a bit. So if I can come down and sort of show you, you can see you got quite a gap there. So that side of the dog welds onto the boat in that orientation like that, and then this slides in like that, and you just whack it down. And because this here is a flat line along there, it'll basically hammer it down until this is perfectly flush with this piece here, and you just basically add them as many around the perimeter as you need in order to get it perfectly flush all the way around that hatch. Perfect! And so when you've got it perfectly flush like that, you can just go through and weld up. Once you've got it all tacked down, it's nice and square the whole way through, like in every area, then you can just run one big bead right the way around. And taking these dogs off is pretty easy, so you only weld it on one side so that you can do this. There's no strength in it if you only do one side, so you can easily remove them just like that, move it off to your next location, and then that just can be cleaned up with a grinder. Alrighty, so tags removed. You can see we've tacked most of the way around the perimeter of this thing. It's pretty smooth and flush and ready to go. Now I haven't ground down into this in quite a deep V or anything like that. It's fairly thin steel, it's only 6mm steel. So I'm just going to set the welder a bit hot. At the moment we're only pulling 160 amps. I'll probably bump that up to maybe 200, something like that, and just burn in a bit deeper so that we get some pretty deep penetration. Actually, reverse that, Jess. I'll start from that corner and head the other way. Welding. So Jess and Birk downstairs, Birk basically next to fire extinguishers in case we need them, and Jess with a bucket of water right underneath where I'm welding, stops any sparks going through. As you can see, there's quite a few up top, but nothing down below because of that bucket of water catching everything. Is that alright?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Welding. You good to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay, have a look. Welded. So, right the way around, there's a pretty decent bead. Sort of show you up close, you can kind of see that's the weld profile that you get. A couple of stop starts, but pretty reasonable profile the whole way along. But we got that all the way around. Nice radius cornices. Radius corners. There we go. So last thing to do, get that thing there off and do a bit of a grind and a clean up, and then we can start putting some paint on that. Right, now that this bit is done, it's time to start figuring out some of the other parts of the genset, things like the water system as well as the exhaust system. All of that is happening inside the engine room. So on the genset, for the cooling system, you've got what was essentially the top radiator hose. It would come out of here, the thermostat's just there, which controls the temperature, regulates how hot the engine runs. Comes out of here and goes into the radiator and then cools down with gravity. Hot air rises, cold water, in this case, sinks. So it cools down with a fan pulling air through the radiator and cools the temperature of that coolant down, and then comes back in here with the water pump. Basically it must have a path up to here to the water pump. This is your water pump here. So we need to join this hose and this hose to that pipe and that pipe. Doesn't matter which one goes where, just so long as it's circulating through this here. Now these are keel cooling pipes, so these basically go through the hull, they do a U-turn, and they go right to the very far end of the boat, almost to the bow, and then turn around and come all the way back. So we've got a massive big loop of coolant that happens with these two pipes. But what we need to do is essentially take the pipes from here down to there. Now to do that, I don't want to use rubber because it's pretty risky if something smacks into it or does anything like that. So I want to do a rubber pipe that does a U-turn, and then I want to go solid stainless pipe down to the floor here. We'll bolt it somewhere on the floor here, and then come across and then do a rubber pipe doing a U-turn into this pipe here. So it's rubber mounted at both ends. We'll do exactly the same with this guy. So it'll come out of here, do sort of like a U-turn, sort of come down, stainless, something, and then over to this one over here, and then rubber mounted at this end as well. So it allows the genset to flex because we're flex mounted. So the rubber pipes allow the genset to flex. The solid mounted pipes on the actual boat itself down here take out any risk of kicking it, dropping something, and then dumping all the coolant throughout the boat and losing the coolant on the genset.
More on that next episode. See you then.